Greetings, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Reading Epic Threads. I'm your host, Patrick Gunnels, joining you from Houston, Texas, this February 28th, 2025 at 7:03 a.m. Central Standard Time. I'm in the Pat Cave right now, staring at a beautiful smartphone that has my live stream on Substack. That's right. I have currently 10 people watching me live on Substack. It's my special Pat Cave, the place where people can go to interact with me. Sue Miller says, wish you would read. Oh, okay. So anyway, Sue, I will get back to you after I'm done recording. But anyway, let's go ahead and start because today is the Tariffs episode. So I'm going to be reading one article from Erik Carlson and then another article from Contemplations on the Tree of Woe, which is treeofwoe.substack.com. A little normie, but very high IQ, very high functioning, and very insightful. But let's go ahead and get started. Let's just jump right into it, shall we? But before I do that, guys, don't forget, right now, if you order, you get the amazing castor blend in 4 ounce or 2 ounce. This is a 2 ounce bottle. 10% off, plus another 10% off for using promo code Shapiro for a total of 20% off. Do what everybody is doing with their skin right now. They're using the suppressed brilliance of castor oil, but mixed with premium food grade plant oils to make a product that isn't sticky like castor oil, but gives you all the benefits and all the benefits of other amazing oils, such as amaranth oil. That's an amazing oil. Sea buckthorn fruit oil, another amazing oil, one of the only natural sources of omega-7 fatty acids, which you'll find in your own skin. Argan oil, apricot kernel oil, vitamin E oil, and then the essential oil blend of your choice, or unscented if you're not into that. Go to tulipblooms.shop. Use promo code Shapiro for 10% off, and until March 4th, another 10% off, giving you a total 20% off. Check it out, y'all. Let's begin. Oops. That's my Gmail. Where's my Erik Carlson? All right, there we go. Bam. This is called Trade Tariff Analogy. It's from ericc.substack.com. By Erik Carlson. Trump's trade wars with Canada, Mexico, and China are currently on temporary hiatus. Since its start, it's been narrativized as Trump starting a fight with some innocent countries. In reality, it is an American president finally standing up for America. The other 3 countries would love nothing more than to keep the trade relationships unchanged because they greatly benefit from the incredibly unfair situation. Instead of joining in and supporting Trump for rectifying a bad situation, Democrats like AOC and Chuck Schumer have used press conferences with props to show how everything in America will cost more. They're essentially standing behind Canada, Mexico, and China. This shows how little they truly care about America and Americans. When it comes to GDP, trade with China, Canada, and Mexico is very lopsided. U.S. exports to China account for 0.5% of U.S. GDP. U.S. exports to Canada account for 1.4% of U.S. GDP. U.S. exports to Mexico account for 1.2% of U.S. GDP. By comparison, Chinese exports to the U.S. account for 3% of China's GDP. Canadian exports to the U.S. account for 19% of Canada's GDP. Mexican exports to the U.S. make up 33% of Mexico's GDP. In theory, if the U.S. stopped doing business with all of these countries, its overall GDP would drop by 3.1%. Not really that significant. It would be roughly the same as if China stopped exporting to the U.S. If Canada stopped exporting to the US, it would account for 1/5 of their gross domestic product. With its excessive government-run programs, they could no longer afford to fund their country. Mexico would be hit the hardest. 1/3 of their gross domestic product would go away if they stopped exporting to the US. The US doesn't merely fund the Mexican economy, it also financially supports many of their citizens through the American welfare system, while also taking in their criminals. Beyond even this, many who are working in the US illegally send money home to Mexico, which goes towards supporting the Mexican economy even further. Sending illegals back to Mexico while tariffing their exports 25% would devastate Mexico. Analogy. If you think about trade among the US, China, Canada, and Mexico bloc and its impact on each country's GDP as being the renting of a 4-bedroom house, it looks a little like this. The rent is $4,000 a month, and each gets his own bedroom with equal access to the rest of the house. In theory, each should pay $1,000 a month, but after living together a while and their lease about up, it looks a little more like this. The US is paying $2,800, China's paying $750, Canada's paying $300, and Mexico's paying $150. Not only is Mexico paying the least amount, but their girlfriend unofficially moved in a few months after renting the house and isn't paying any rent. After becoming increasingly frustrated over time, the US finally tells the other roommates that they're no longer going to pay almost 3 times more than they should be paying. The other roommates are going to have to pay their fair share of the rent, or the US will move out in a few months as soon as the lease is up. Instead of thanking the US for carrying their portion of the financial burden for way too long and offering to pay more rent, Canada and Mexico have threatened to no longer pay their rent with the few months left on the lease, leaving the US with Canada and Mexico's portion to pay as well until the lease is up and the US can move out. The US just has to get through the next few months remaining on the lease before they can move out and either get an apartment on their own, onshore production, creating American jobs, or rent a house with others, new trading partners. Meanwhile, the threat Americans face is the possible need to go without guacamole in their Chipotle and maple syrup on their IHOP for a while. I think they can manage just fine. Syrup. Ever heard of Vermont? The US is not only in a position of power to negotiate, but they are the ones who have been victimized for far too long. If the US chooses no longer to continue on with the current trade scenario with Canada, Mexico, and China, it might hurt for a little while, but in the end, it should make the US more independent and create more jobs. Either Canada, Mexico, and China start playing fair or the US moves on from trading with them and brings more production back home. It seems like a win-win to me. And that is the tariff analogy from Erik Carlson. Very nice indeed. I'd like to say a big hi to Debbie, Miss Alta, Kelly McCulloch. Oh gosh, so good to see you in here. I am talking to the chat of my live stream on Substack, because that's a thing you can do on Substack now. You know that's badass. Before I get to contemplations on the Tree of Woe, I'm just going to bust out some Dawn Billy. February 20th, 2025. So I'm catching up to the present. Don't forget, by the way, right now, go to tulipblooms.shop. That's right, tulipblooms.shop. Promo code Shapiro for 10% off, and until Tuesday, that's right, until March 4th, another 10% off of Castor Blend only. It's 20% off of the amazing castor blend, now in rose geranium, sandalwood, lavender, core essential blend, and of course, unscented for those of you who just don't like to party with the essential oils. From dawnbilly.substack.com, it's time to awaken the woke. At its heart, wokeness is divisive, exclusionary, and hateful. It basically gives mean people a shield to be mean and cruel, armored in false virtue. Elon Musk. Author Dawn Billy. How do you go about starting a movement? I want to start a movement. The purpose of this movement would be to remove the term woke from our vocabulary and replace it with communist. Instead of Kamala Harris is so woke, we should say Kamala Harris is a communist. The term woke is confusing to people. I'm willing to bet there are a lot of 80-year-olds in the country who don't know what woke means, but I bet they know what a communist is. Without even realizing it, we've allowed the expression woke to become an almost comical slur, referring to the communists around us. It's not completely our fault, and we're not the only ones who were caught unawares. Most of today's communists don't know they're communists. We need to educate them. You support DEI, you're a communist. You're a proponent of critical race theory, you're a communist. You're a climate change activist, you're a communist. Try it next time you're talking to someone who hasn't yet figured out that they're a communist. Watch them stutter and stammer and get red in the face as they swear to you that they're not communist. Don't relent. Consider yourself part of the movement, the re-education of the communists. They're not some trendy, woke hipster. They're communists. The term has been around for almost a century. In the 1940s, African Americans used woke to explain someone who had become aware of issues of justice. For years, the Black community used woke as a way to describe those who could recognize racism. It became politicized in 2014 after the death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. Brown's death sparked the Black Lives Matter movement, and activists urged others to stay woke as a call to action against police violence. Since then, the word has been used as a tool to push political correctness on issues like race, gender, sexual identity, and other issues of importance to social justice activists. According to Dana Brownlee, a Black contributor to Forbes, the term woke is an offensive cultural appropriation. She wrote, "Suffice it to say that hearing white people randomly label individuals and organizations woke is often an unsettling, if not infuriating experience. Leave it to the party that believe themselves to be the superior authority on race relations to hijack the term from the Black community. Although, to be fair, people on the right are also guilty of misappropriating the word. We use it to mock people on the left, and they're mad about it." According to the linguist Tony Thorne, people who actually identify as woke no longer use the word to describe themselves, preferring to use more complex language such as empaths, since woke now has negative connotations. He says that the progressives need a more academic or scientific term because what is a communist without a label? We do need a vocabulary that progressives can use. They deserve to have that, he said. Luckily, we've already got their vocabulary. It's called communism, socialism, Marxism. The evolving meaning of woke in corporate America contains a pros and cons list of being woke in corporate America. Below is my movement's interpretation of this list. Pro, boosting awareness of social injustices and their impact. Con, leads to divisiveness that can create tension and conflict, also known as communism. Pro, more inclusive workplaces where individuals feel valued regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation. Con, concentrating on race, gender, and sexual orientation separates people into classes, also known as communism. Pro, promote a sense of social responsibility, and create positive social and environmental change. Con, not everyone has the same views on what constitutes positive social and environmental change. This can contribute to a sense of us versus them, also known as, you guessed it, communism. By using the word woke to describe the behaviors of the communists, we've weakened the impact of what they've done to us and our country. That needs to change. The direction my life was heading and the course of my future was directly and negatively affected by communists. I will never forget the day when I was explaining to someone what had transpired to change everything I thought my life would be. As I explained the details, he responded with, "It's Marxism. They're Marxists." It was like a slap in the face. Despite years of listening to Rush Limbaugh warn us about the rise of communism in our country, I didn't recognize it when it affected my family. Maybe I was naive or stupid, but it never occurred to me that what happened was the result of a modern day version of communism. Since that moment, I've become determined to make others see it for what it is. It's not woke or fairness or diversity or equity or inclusion. It's not climate change or critical race theory. It's communism, and it needs to be stopped. As a teenager in the 1980s, I was well aware of communism. Russia was the boogeyman, and it was drummed into our heads that communism was bad. What happened since then? We got complacent. We got distracted. Our media, schools, government, and corporations were infiltrated by communists. The long march through the institutions came disguised as critical race theory, diversity, equity, inclusion, gender dysphoria, LGBTQ plus rights, and any other label they could slap on it. By the time we realized what was happening, communism was repackaged as wokeness, and we were given our own label of sexist, racist, homophobe. In an interview with the Heritage Foundation, Jesse Kelly discussed his book, The Anti-Communist Manifesto. Jesse Kelly works for the deep state, by the way. Separate discussion. Jesse explains communism as the religion of the malcontent, and that is the best definition I've ever heard. The communist finds the malcontents and recruits them to use their anger and bitterness to burn down society. They're miserable. They believe they've been treated unfairly and victimized. Therefore, they'll destroy everything you have. If they can't be happy, you can't be happy. Picture every twisted face, angry liberal you know, and apply this definition to them. It fits. The Anti-Communist Manifesto should be required reading for every American. At the very least, it should be turned into a textbook and taught in our schools. It's a book I recommend everyone read to understand what we're up against. The bleeding heart liberals among us should read the book to realize that what they've turned into is no longer a Democrat standing up for the common man. It's communism. The idea that the communists don't recognize themselves as such isn't surprising. Many of the Germans didn't understand the depth of the atrocities committed by the Nazis during World War II, despite the majority of Germans either actively or passively supporting Hitler. Many Germans denied supporting the Nazi Party or claimed that they were helpless to do anything about the atrocities that took place. The Allies wanted to educate the Germans by forcing them to tour concentration camps, watch footage of Nazi crimes, and purge their libraries of Nazi materials. Is this what we need to do? Do we need to force the communists to confront their participation in the attempted destruction of America? How do we permanently change the course of the many communist-based ideologies that have been shoved down our throats? Will it happen one executive order at a time? If that's the case, I suspect the communists are waiting patiently to resume their march to make America communist again. Liberals should no longer be allowed to hide behind the soft veil of wokeness. Whether or not they realize they were participating in a form of communism, their actions need to be exposed. The next time you hear someone use the word woke, please do me a favor and replace it with communists. We need to confront and expose them for what they are. Our country and the entire world needs to be free from communism. Hopefully, There's a plan for that. That's Dawn Billy. DawnBilly.substack.com. Hit the thumbs up on this video if you can. You're watching me live on Substack, readingepicthreads.substack.com. Then hit the heart if you could. If you are watching me on Rumble, the recorded version, or on Twitter or X, hit the heart on X, hit the thumbs up on Rumble, share it with your friends. Helps enormously when you do that. Let people know where you can find me. I don't really show up in any algorithms. So any growth, by the way, this is a shirt made for me by 8-Track, almost certainly a Fed. You know something? I think this is screwed up. Hang on a second. Isn't that weird? I'm backwards. What's going on there? I don't understand. Mirror my camera. I don't want to mirror my camera. There we go. Almost certainly a Fed. Now I'm normal. Now let's touch up my appearance. All right. Tell me if I look better with my appearance touched up. Or maybe it's just not going to do that. Kind of over it. All right. Let's go ahead. Hey guys, don't forget to go to epicminerals.net. I just want to address this actually. There might be some of you out there who got a zeolite extra spray that had a taste to it. We increased the concentration of zeolite, and the result was what used to just taste like water had kind of a slight earthy taste to it. Some of you really didn't like that. I just want you to know we have reverted back to the original formula. It's got a little bit more humic and fulvic, a little less zeolite. And as a result, it's back to tasting like water. I just want you to know that. So go to epicminerals.net. That's epicminerals.net. Get your zeolite extra spray. Promo code Shapiro for 10% off. All right, y'all. Let me look at crypto. I'm not like the normal person. When crypto crashes, I get excited. Right now, Bitcoin is down to $80,000. I don't personally buy Bitcoin anymore. Bitcoin maximalists are a blight on the world. Let's see, with our friends over at XRP down to $2 flat. Guys, I need to make more money so I can buy more XRP, XLM, and Hedera. Damn. All right. Let's keep on keeping on. Finally, from treeofwoe.substack.com. That's treeofwoe.substack.com. All right, let me make sure that he doesn't punk me out in the middle of this column. All right, we're good. A Lens to Understand the Trump Tariffs, a guest essay by Gary Brode from Deep Knowledge Investing. All right. This week's essay is from Tree of Woe's friend and collaborator, Gary Brode, director of the research from Deep Knowledge Investing. He and I have been discussing setting up a premium Substack called Tree of Knowledge, or maybe Tree of Knowledge of Wheel and Woe, for deeper dives into finance and trading. If you'd be interested in that, let us know in the comments. Check it out, treeofwoe.substack.com. Hello, Woe readers. I've been fortunate enough to collaborate with Alex on prior pieces, including writing a Deep Knowledge Investing Part 4, et cetera, et cetera. The big news in the financial markets over the past couple of weeks has been tariff threats and discussions. I recently read an apt description of how people interpret President Trump. It said that his detractors take him literally but not seriously, while his supporters take him seriously but not literally. That's Selena Zito who came up with that. I believe the second interpretation is the correct one. To that end, many of the discussed tariff threats are not actually about a desire for tariffs, but rather an attempt to gain cooperation or compliance on unrelated issues. Deep Knowledge Investing is focused on helping our subscribers make money in the stock market, so much of my analysis is time sensitive. So I don't really know exactly. When did this come out? Hang on. Hold for processing. February 14th. All right. So this is 2 weeks old. Sorry about that. However, since tariffs are likely to be a significant area of discussion over the next 4 years, I think it's useful to provide a lens on how we think they should be interpreted. As always, with issues tied to international relations, my views will evolve based on news and events. I also feel the need to provide a trigger warning for my fellow woe readers. Unlike many economists, market strategists, and the Wall Street Journal, I don't think President Trump is about to destroy the economy. As a result, my views are not as pessimistic as this publication prefers. He's called the Tree of Woe, after all. You have been warned that the world is not about to come to an end, so read on at your own risk. Trade is great. Not all tariffs are bad. In college, I learned about Porter's theory of comparative advantage. It says that we'll all be better off if countries produce what they're best at producing and trade with each other. It makes sense. And throughout history, empires and fortunes have risen based on access to trade. In the East, China benefited from its Silk Road. Rome prospered for many reasons, but access to trade routes and building a massive road system was a meaningful contributor. England built a worldwide empire on the back of the world's best navy and domination of shipping lanes and trade. Finally, it's no coincidence that the financial capital of the United States is New York City, a place with unusually deep shipping ports. Miami, Boston, Los Angeles, and San Francisco all have various specialties, but shipping and access to trade helped put them on the map. All of this is great on paper. Most of the time, it's good in practice as well. Unfortunately, it's a problem for much of the U.S. right now. Our manufacturing base and high-quality blue-collar jobs have been hollowed out. This is leading to declining quality and length of life in much of the country as the U.S. outsources manufacturing to places with a lower cost of labor. To maintain the dollar as the world's reserve currency means we need to run trade deficits and supply the world with dollars they use for their own trade. The impact of this has been to make part of the U.S. very wealthy and part of the country destitute. Losing our ability to manufacture is not only a quality of life issue, but also a national security one. We are not capable of building ships in quantity. Both military and commercial aircraft quality and the ability to produce new models of planes on time are declining. It takes longer for us to build skyscrapers now than it did 80 years ago, despite multiple presidential administrations of both parties talking extensively about improving infrastructure. Our bridges, roads, and railroad tracks aren't improving. We've yet to see the $1 trillion of shovel-ready projects President Obama promised us in 2008. In 2016, candidate Trump told us, if elected, our new airports he would build would be the envy of the world. Neither happened. And I don't think it's the fault of President Obama or President Trump. Our permitting and approval process is so convoluted that it's impossible to start a project in a 4 or 8 year presidential term, let alone finish one. Of greater concern to me are the things we don't make and can't make here. The entire world now runs on computer chips. While NVIDIA and AMD are American companies, they don't manufacture here. Intel has had issues with its last 2 generations of processors, which kept burning out due to too much voltage delivered to meet ever greater processing needs. Their fix is to limit the voltage, which means for 2 years, Intel customers have been paying for performance the chips couldn't reliably deliver. I'm hoping the new Core Ultra line will address this problem. The best chips in the world are made in Taiwan by TSMC. Taiwan is a U.S. ally right now. TSMC is a valuable partner right now. Taiwan is hoping the silicon shield prevents a Chinese takeover. China has made it explicitly clear that they will take Taiwan at some point and do so by force if necessary. I believe China will sacrifice TSMC as an asset if that's the cost of fulfilling their vision of reunifying China. Other top manufacturers include Qualcomm and Samsung. The machines needed to produce the ultra high-end chips to do extreme ultraviolet lithography and are only made by ASML Holding. Simply stated, only high-end domestic chip manufacturer the U.S. has is Intel, and right now the company lags its competition. Whether you want to make appliances, cars, airplanes, weapons systems, or develop artificial intelligence, the U.S. does not currently have the capacity to do so without help from other countries. That's fine right now, but it's not hard to imagine future scenarios where that becomes a national security and quality of life disaster. The U.S. used to manufacture its pharmaceuticals in Puerto Rico. Some smart people in Congress didn't like the idea of big pharma getting tax breaks, so Congress eliminated them. The result wasn't more money flowing to Washington, D.C., but rather our pharmaceutical manufacturing moved to China. During COVID, we needed to rely on China for our protective equipment, which was of inconsistent quality. If you want to argue with me that the classic model of trade means we should always buy from the foreign low-cost producer, you're welcome to do so, and I will understand your point of view. I'm still going to point out that if we can't make semiconductor chips, pharmaceuticals, ships, or protective equipment, maybe we need to reconsider the model. There's also a lot of indeterminate speculation on the inflationary impact of tariffs. The data on that claim isn't clear to me. There are arguments that the Great Depression was caused by tariffs and counter-arguments that tariffs weren't the issue. During President Trump's first term, the inflation index that measures producer prices, the costs that eventually make their way into the consumer price index, didn't rise. It's possible to argue we had a different economy then and that China successfully ignored and evaded some tariffs. One argument I find compelling is that tariffs may be inflationary initially, but because they incentivize increasing domestic supply, that increased supply can prevent further price increases. Whether any future Trump tariffs are inflationary or not will depend on levels and implementation details that have not been determined at this time. Again, my apologies to the woe readers who understandably prefer a more consistently negative message. Will President Trump's tariffs address these issues? It's impossible to tell right now. He hasn't been clear on what his exact tariff plans are. Some of those plans are for actual tariffs. Others are negotiating points to get concessions in other areas. Finally, like almost all government policies, whatever does get announced and implemented will have unintended consequences. Tariffs aren't always about tariffs. While many economists are wailing about the threats to free trade, it's important to recognize that President Trump doesn't always want tariffs. He uses the threat of tariffs to gain compliance on non-economic issues. We had an event 2 weeks ago that illustrates this point perfectly. Colombia. When Colombia refused to accept repatriation of their own citizens, President Trump responded by threatening a 25% tariff on Colombian products, scheduled to rise to 50% 1 week later. Within hours, Colombia agreed to the repatriation of all Colombian citizens in the U.S. illegally, including on U.S. military aircraft. The president of Colombia issued some threats of his own, but quickly agreed to all U.S. demands and at one point offered to send his personal plane to pick up his citizens. Canada and Mexico. We got a second example of the Trump tariff approach last week. The president rocked markets late in the day on Friday and over the weekend by insisting he was going to implement 25% tariffs on our neighbors, Canada and Mexico. Those tariffs were put on hold for a month when both countries offered what appears to be meaningful assistance and cooperation in preventing the flood of people and fentanyl illegally entering the U.S. through our shared borders. I believe the reason President Trump put the tariffs on hold rather than canceled them is because he wants to ensure actual cooperation and compliance. He's decided border security is going to be a shared issue and not solely a U.S. problem. The EU. Potential European tariffs are a likely third example of this approach. Many Europeans are worried that discussed tariffs on the EU would have a harmful effect on their economy. I think Trump is following his usual plan of threatening tariffs to get other concessions, with Russia and China becoming closer allies and the BRICS coalition attempting to challenge the dollar, it is not in U.S. interests to try to crash the EU economy. The most likely issue on the table would be NATO funding. Many European countries spend less than what they've agreed to spend on their defense budgets. This leaves President Trump and many Americans with the opinion that the U.S. is subsidizing European defense and that Europe isn't living up to their agreements as part of NATO. This was a subject of much discussion during President Trump's first term. Could he stop threatening tariffs if EU countries commit more to their defense budgets? There are also areas where European governments subsidize their own companies and industries that compete directly with U.S. companies. Airbus subsidies irritated Boeing for years, and Boeing regularly complained about an uneven playing field. I'm not hearing a lot of talk about these kinds of company or industry-specific issues, but they have arisen in the past and could be part of a future deal. I'll also acknowledge that there are industries where the U.S. subsidizes its own companies or has high-priced supply deals, which could be seen as an indirect subsidy. Any uneven playing field allegations can be pointed in multiple directions. Closing non-reciprocal trade. There are exceptions to my above lens, and sometimes President Trump does want tariffs. Other countries have become expert at using the U.S. press to complain about tariffs and a perceived lack of access to the giant U.S. consumer market. Many of these complainers have in place substantial tariffs and other regulations which restrict access by the U.S. to their markets. Despite having the world's second largest economy, China is still taking advantage of its developing nation status at the World Trade Organization. Many Americans find this lack of reciprocity in our trade relations to be galling. President Trump is one of them. Some of the loudest countries trying to exit the dollar system also have the largest trade barriers in place. The U.S. is no angel in this category, but many of the countries complaining are less open to our products than we are to theirs. Data from tradebarrierindex.org, higher is worse. Russia and India at 87 and number 88 out of 88 countries listed. Russia and India that makes them closed economies. Dang. Fascinating. Kill equities to save bonds. You may have seen this expression lately. The thinking is that the U.S. is facing a debt crisis. We are in full Ponzi scheme mode as we now print dollars to pay the interest on dollars we printed last year. On balance sheet debt is now over $37 trillion with deficits of $2 to $3 trillion a year. Doge spending cuts can't get here fast enough. A side note, I was skeptical of the ability of Doge to make significant spending cuts. Early efforts there have exceeded my expectations. I wish them well in cutting government waste. To make matters worse, previous Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen shortened the duration on U.S. bond refinancing when rates were low, and she should have done the opposite. Now, as the yield curve has uninverted by raising the yield demanded for longer-term treasuries, called a bear steepener, the U.S. faces a need to refinance ever greater amounts of debt at higher rates. Because they encourage buying domestically and encourage buying foreign products, tariffs generally cause the dollar to strengthen against other currencies. In turn, this can lower treasury yields. The stock market is signaling unhappiness with all of these potential tariffs, but whether the stock market goes up or down, the treasury needs to refinance more debt, and doing so at higher interest rates will crush the budget. For more on this, be sure to check out my DKI article, Counterintuitive Inflation. President Trump likes a strong stock market, but his recent public comments have made it explicitly clear he's willing to endure a certain amount of short-term pain to get the results he wants. Refinancing expiring debt is something that needs to be done. Update. As I was writing this, there's increased speculation that President Trump and Treasury Secretary Bessent are using tariff talks to strengthen the dollar. In turn, this is lowering the yield on the 10-year Treasury and giving them a chance to refinance the debt at a more advantageous rate. That would give the administration additional room for the tax cuts they want. There's a lot of gamesmanship involved here, but Bessent is clearly a much better option at Treasury than Secretary Yellen was. We'll be watching future actions and adjusting our thoughts on the matter as events unfold. The Canadian and Mexican tariffs may be aimed at China. When President Trump announced the 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada, I got a lot of questions regarding his actual motivations. Government officials from both countries said that at this point they aren't completely sure what they'd need to do to be in compliance with the wishes of the White House. That may actually be true. Public comments out of the White House were focused on asking for more help securing the border and a reduction in the amount of fentanyl crossing into the U.S. These are reasonable requests. But if Canadian and Mexican officials didn't know specifically what kind of cooperation President Trump wanted, they would be unable to comply. I think it's likely there's another issue which is significant but not being discussed. During President Trump's first term, he enacted steep tariffs on imports from China. China evaded a lot of those tariffs by shipping through Mexico, Canada, and one particular Asian country. I think Trump is trying to close that loophole and make it more cost efficient for China to just pay the tariff than to try to evade it. I'm making an inference, not reporting on something I know. The elimination of the constantly abused de minimis trade exemption by Chinese exporters is additional evidence supporting my speculation. For now, President Trump is indicating that he's satisfied with border cooperation, but at some point he's going to take on China directly. If tariffs on Mexico and Canada come up again at that time, this would be the likely reason. Conclusion. For reasons readers will understand, the press likes to make it seem as if President Trump is a simple man with simple strategies. The truth is much more complicated. Sometimes he uses the threat of tariffs to compel cooperation on non-economic issues. Sometimes he uses tariffs to try to level a playing field he reasonably thinks is tilted against U.S. interests. And sometimes he wants to use tariffs as a tool to restart U.S. manufacturing capacity, knowing that having a consistent playbook makes it easy for adversaries to respond. He often uses hyperbole and misdirection. This is why I think the lens of take him seriously but not literally is the more useful approach than the opposite. Many economists are busy calculating the economic effect of policies which haven't been designed, haven't been discussed publicly, and haven't been implemented. I recommend holding off on the specific analysis until there's something specific to analyze. I also add the reminder that these kinds of international trade policies often have unintended consequences, often making detailed analysis a pointless exercise. At Deep Knowledge Investing, I work with hedge funds, family offices, investment advisors, and individuals to help them get better returns in the stock market. The recommended portfolio and my personal portfolio, this is an ad for the writer, so I'm going to read it because I've already appropriated his material. And my personal portfolio are heavily weighted to themes that will benefit from debasement of the dollar and all fiat, growing energy needs, and individual high-growth stocks in fields that I believe will benefit for the next 5 to 10 years or more. If that's interesting to you, you're welcome to subscribe. You're going to want to do that at deepknowledgeinvesting.com. Deepknowledgeinvesting.com. I'm offering Tree of Woe readers and 25% discount on yearly and monthly subscription through the end of March. Just use coupon code WOE25. For those of you with questions or opinions, you're always welcome to reach me at ir@deepknowledgeinvesting.com. All right, there we go. I hope that my saying your ad is sufficient for my snagging your material without your permission, because I never ask permission, ever. It doesn't happen. So, guys, guess what? That's our show for today. Thank you, everybody, for watching. The time for reading Epic Threads is 9 p.m. Eastern. As close to 7 days a week as I can knock out, probably something more like 5 to 6 days a week. Don't forget to go to tulipblooms.shop. Extra 10% off until Tuesday the 4th of March. and get the 10% off the Castor Blend. So 10% off with promo code Shapiro, 10% off just automatically, making for 20% off until Tuesday. And then, of course, we'll go back to our regular prices. But don't forget also, stack your order here, guys. We've got the Rainfall. We've got Epic Moisture Creamy Body Butter. And don't forget, if you want to watch this show live, completely unedited, then you're going to need to go to readingepicthreads.substack.com, where I am currently live to all of these wonderful people. This is really exciting. I love this whole Substack setup that I got going on. I'm pointing right at the second camera, which is Substack right now. So anyway, thank you everybody for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, share it, subscribe on Rumble. Just hit follow. All of these things help enormously when you do that. Let us pray. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. I love you all. Thank you so much for being here. And I'll see you tomorrow.
I will be the greatest president that God ever created.